My Middle Eastern heritage, there's not enough words that we use and everything that goes with it. So I don't know what yours is. Upside is I married an introvert. Whoa. There's never a dull moment. So what is it for you? Join me on a journey going back a week, okay? It's lunchtime, October 31st, Sunday, a week ago. You've just finished lunch, and now join me in building a mental list of all of the people from after lunch last week to right now that you had some sort of interaction with where words were spoken. So start making the list. If you want to go old school, pull out your BlackBerry and use your stylus. Or the flip phone and try to write a text without the full keyboard. So who's on your list? For us, Sunday, grandkids and kids. Former neighbors, we went to their house after trick-or-treating was over. The light was off. We rang the bell. The 2 dogs went crazy. Bob answered the door and said, "We're out of candy," and then saw it was us. I'm going to throw some in there to help you make your list, okay? Stopped at Kroger to get my prescriptions. Interacted with people at Kroger. Of course, I went to Lowe's. There's always a reason to go there. Bless you, my son. Grabbed a cup of coffee at the local coffee place. Met neighbors. We're in a new place. We've been there since June, but haven't seen a lot of people. Went to our first HOA meeting. Met people we hadn't seen, which is really kind of fun. Colleagues at work, they're the best. Contractors. A guy that services this building for our HVAC system to keep it running. He's been doing it for years. It was great to see Gail in the building and just talk to him about how things were running for us. Loved that. It would be really fun to compare lists, wouldn't it? Because I just asked us to write the mental list of the people that we engaged, who we spoke words to. What if we added people we texted or wrote or typed words to? I bet the list would grow longer, and I bet if we compare lists, we'd all go, "Oh, I forgot those people in our lives." The point of creating the mental list is to remind us of this. We all have people. We got peeps. We interact individually and then corporately with an incredible number of people in our lives. Some as simple as a thank you when we stop into a store and purchase something. The rest, friends and family who we spend and communicate a great deal of time to. And so that gives us incredible opportunity to speak words into them that breathe life into them. And as Kevin mentioned, we decided that this would be a great month to process what it's like to love one another well, especially after we've been in a very difficult season. In fact, there's 2 reasons why we wanted to cover this topic this month. The first one is this: the cultural climate that we are in, not only locally, I think globally as well, has seen contempt become common. Words that are hateful, demeaning, and derogative are all around us. Far too often, those words outweigh words of love and encouragement. And secondly, again, as Kevin mentioned, followers of Jesus are called to set the standard to be so exemplary that people cannot help but be drawn to that. So he set the stage, Jesus himself, for all who follow him, that we are to stand above all others when it comes to how we relate to one another. He lived it, he taught it, and he left his disciples. When he left his disciples, he reiterated it at a dinner the night before he was crucified, what we call the Last Supper. John, one of his disciples, who wrote about Jesus' life, spent about 1/4 of the book of John that we have focused on the words that Jesus spoke at that Last Supper because they're so important. They're the words he wanted to impress on them. Spent 3 years with some of those disciples, and he wants to give them final instructions. It is there at that dinner that these words are spoken that change the way people are to relate to one another. It raised the bar. He said this: "So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other." If you stop there, that's one thing, but this is where the bar got raised. "Just as I have loved, strained, estranged, and severed, It's as good a time as ever to return to one of the most basic, life-changing calls of all, to love like Jesus did. That's our focus for the next 3 weeks, addressing 3 practices that will help us become specialists in loving like Jesus. And doing so together will help encourage one another when days get difficult. Because when we love like that, it impacts our families and our neighborhoods. It impacts employers and employees. It impacts merchants and customers, teachers and students, committees and boards, and on we could go. Every relationship in our life, because it wakes me up. We're using and consuming more words than ever before. And obviously, because of the global reach of them, we're impacting more people than ever before. Sadly, my take, the speed at which this typically happens can create a problem, because far too often words can flow without weighing their impact. This is Rob's formula, real science here. More words plus less filtering equals more pain. Our words have power, not surprising to anybody. Interestingly enough, thousands of years ago, a wise man we know as Solomon wrote a number of proverbs to pass along to his children, and the ones he wrote about regarding speech and using words are as relevant today as they were then, and they didn't have a cell phone among them. He said things like, he contrasted the impact of gentle words versus harsh words in Proverbs 15. He compares the words to kind words to the sweetness of honey. I love that image. In Proverbs 16, he says the words of the godly are like a life-giving fountain in Proverbs 10, like sterling silver, again in Proverbs 10. They are helpful and they encourage many. On the flip side, he notes the life-sucking impact of lying words, deceitful speech, gossip, angry words, and far more. That wise man knew then, before a cell phone hit the market, that the power of words was enormous. And I think there's one phrase he uses that sums it all for us this morning. The tongue can bring death or life. Our words have the power to breathe life into others or to suck life from them. And while we might not remember what somebody told us they had for breakfast this morning, we can still recall some of the most hurtful things that have ever been said to us, and some of the most life-affirming things that have ever been said to us years later. Just a reminder to us that is the power of the words we use, orally or written. A number of years ago, a young man came to my office. He'd been going through a very, very difficult time in his life. And as he poured out his life with just this heavy heart, my colleague listened, and at some point in the conversation, looked at him and said, "I just want you to know how proud I am of you." That man's face and the tears that followed are seared in my memory from over 25 years ago. That was a sacred moment for that young man. He needed those words, probably didn't even realize them, but my colleague was wise enough to see it and spoke life to him. 25 years later, it wasn't even me. I remember what happened in that young man's life. That is the impact our words can have. In fact, it has become the subject of numerous studies over the years. And again, I thank Jeremy Dickens for taking the lead on this. Several years ago, the Harvard Business Review came out with an article reporting on a variety of studies about our words. Several groups studied the ratio of our positive words to negative words. And they looked for a correlation between the ratio of the positive and negative and on relationships. So one of those studies was done by a psychologist by the name of John Gottman. John created and tracked the ratio of positive words to negative ones in marriages. His conclusion was that the ideal ratio for a successful marriage was 5 positive words to one negative word. And he predicted with 94% accuracy on the success of the marriage based on 5 positive words and 1 negative. So it wasn't just in marriages that studies were done. There were also other studies done for the workplace. And that group studied that the highest functioning teams functioned well when there were about 5 positive to 1 negative. Well, another group decided, the child specialists looked, and they started looking at this from the parenting level. And sure enough, what did they find out? If you could pick a ratio to maximize a child's growth and a child's development, it would be virtually the same ratio, about 5 positive to 1 negative. Now, they acknowledged in the study, this does not remove speaking the truth, disciplining children, and I think disciplining in terms of guiding them well. It doesn't take them away from that. But in that environment, it had more power. Without that, or when there's far more negative, it had a deep on it goes. But while that's the cultural soup that you and I live in, excuse me, I just lost my spot. But while that's the cultural soup that you and I live in, so sorry, I myself, too often, even in the last year and a half, have tossed too many red glass beads into the heart of other people. There's no excuse for me as a follower of Jesus. He's called me to a different standard, regardless of the circumstances in my life. And that's where I need you, we need one another, to help us to speak good, life-affirming words to one another. There is no way I or we can love as Jesus loved with a ratio that's out of whack. And followers of Jesus should have the best ratio of all, like Jesus did, with the words that we speak orally or we write, text, email, etc. He gives us a clue himself in a statement that he made in what we know as the Sermon on the Mount. Luke recorded what he said. Jesus said, "A good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart, and an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. What you say flows from what is in your heart." So much of the Sermon on the Mount flipped the script for the people that were there, that were straining at every word he had to say. From focusing, what they're used to, and they're used to hearing, focusing on outward actions, to focusing on inward motives and attitudes. It was diametrically opposed to what they were hearing taught. Jesus tells them that what they say comes from the bank that's going on inside their hearts and minds. And that's why it's important to pay attention to the inside, the unseen. And so the first habit for us to focus on, if we are going to speak these life-affirming words, is to make the right deposits into the bank of our heart and our soul. Since our words come from what's going on inside our hearts and inside our minds, I mean, think about this. I can mess this up. So when I have a conversation with somebody, they're not even there. It's the one I'm imagining. Addressing the quality of the words we use. On the one hand, he contrasts foul or abusive language. And in the original Greek with which that passage was written, the word has a connotation of words that are decaying or putrefied. Yeesh. Paul used strong language on purpose. And even in preparation for this, it stopped me in my tracks. That's some heavy-duty stuff. In what ways have I used language in the life of somebody else that was life-sucking, that reeked of death, that didn't breathe life into them? And Paul warns us to be careful to not use any of that kind of speech. Instead, words that will encourage those who hear. Now, I don't want to rush over without asking us, how many times maybe in the last week did we speak freely without the filter and speak in a way that sucked life rather than breathed life? It's not always easy between our normal human nature and the culture that pulls us strongly in another direction. There's some pretty strong words just pounding at the door ready to just let fly. And that's when it's critical to use the filter and check the bank account. These are two simple habits that require relentless attention because they will fade over time. Thankfully, we can pick them up again at any time. Thankfully, we have a God who has an endless source of deposits and building a great filter for us. I want to offer a few caveats here. The first one is that this does not mean we don't speak truthfully. There are times when it is very important to correct, to discipline, or even provide critical feedback. Paul isn't suggesting we coddle everyone in our world with anything but positive affirmation. In fact, I would argue, as I believe he would too, that speaking loving words sometimes is correction and discipline and feedback. Parents know this, coaches know this, supervisors know this, co-workers know it among one another, that these are all important parts of a healthy relationship and relating. And the scriptures tell us that God disciplines those he loves like a loving father. The attitude of being a loving parent is a great part of building the filter that God would have us have with the words that will flow out from within us. Because the attitude of a loving parent helps us to correct, discipline, or provide important feedback. It will help us go from making a point to making a difference. Caveat 1, it doesn't mean we don't speak truthfully. Caveat 2, it doesn't mean we refrain from taking a stand. Standing against what is wrong and with people who've been wronged is important. In fact, healthy boundaries in abusive situations and unjust situations is crucial. And while we could go on a whole nother series, I recommend 3 chapters from a book that Dan Allender wrote called Bold Love. The 3 chapters are at the end of his book, so you could pick up the book and read those 3 chapters. Loving an evil person, loving a fool, and loving a normal sinner. Great input to help us engage with people when it's difficult and maybe it's unhealthy to not speak against things that are crossing boundaries, that are unjust, and that are just wrong. But I also want us to refer to Paul's words, which he spoke to a young follower named Timothy, as another reminder with the filter that we build as it relates to how we engage with people in our world. 1 Timothy chapter 2 says this, "Again I say, don't get involved in foolish, ignorant arguments that only start fights. A servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but must be kind to everyone, able to teach, and be patient with difficult people. Gently instruct those who oppose the truth. Perhaps God will change those people's hearts, and they will learn the truth. Then they will come to their senses and escape the devil's trap, for they've been held captive by him to do whatever he wants." Those words add wonderful insight to remind us how to proceed in a variety of relationships. And lastly, a third caveat. Our focus today is on words we speak, but we've all experienced words spoken to us that have brought deep pain. We still remember them. If that's where you are today, please reach out to someone to process that so God can heal that space in you, because that does need healing for all of us. It is not an excuse for me or for you to not speak life-affirming words into others. It may be an obstacle. So may God bring you healing in that space and process that with someone that you know. Let us know if you need to figure that out. There's room in this whole concept of speaking the truth, providing discipline, often correction, and taking a stand. And it seems the data says if we change our ratio, we'll be effective in all of those situations. In the last year and a half, my wife and I have experienced a significant amount of stressful situations. For all of us, it's been COVID. A little over a year ago, I had a stroke. We felt like it was time to downsize. You all know what moving's like. Getting the house ready in the middle of COVID, downsizing and selling, getting into a new home, changing jobs. I mean, all of the stressors are there. we spoke some of the cruelest, harshest words to one another in the pressure cooker of that year than probably the 40 years of marriage. What we are grateful for is that that's not where it stayed. Time and again, words of apology, genuine apology, would bring healing to one of us, reminding ourselves of what God has done for us in the past and where he's bringing us. Conversations with many of you in this room and beyond who were truthful but also loving, who helped us remember not to negate the human side of the stress, nor forget the God-honoring side of his presence and his provision, which we could write a book on. The point is that while we did too many of these, over time, it was overcome and has been overcome with these. It's never too late. And so, my friends, as we close this service, we're going to give you time to process. How's your ratio? Looking back on the week that you just had, how many people had life-affirming words spoken to them? How many opportunities you look back and go, I could have lingered longer and said something else, and you could have spoken life-affirming words to that person. So take some time to think about who in your world needs to hear the words of life spoken to their soul. And together, let's change the ratio.